The Prophecy of Doom! In the 1500s, an apothecary named Michel Nostradamus wrote a book based on astrology, history, and ancient prophetic traditions called Les Prophéties. In it contains 942 cryptic 4-line poems that are believed to predict events to come. The ambiguous nature of the book means that a lot of academics have said it's way too vague to be taken seriously, and yet regardless, over the years it has been interpreted in numerous ways, and some even taken it to have predicted major historical events. The Great Fire of London, the French Revolution, the rise of a short guy with an insane amount of aura, an evil guy with a mustache, the atomic bombings, and even the most recent pandemic. However, by far the most popular poem in the book revolves around a harbinger of destruction. The year 1999, 7th month. From the sky will come a great king of terror, to bring back to life the great king Ongle Mois. Before and after Mars reigns by good fortune. And my god, if you weren't alive to see what happened, it was crazy, insane, diabolical, the entire— Nothing happened. Some people tried to cope by saying that it was misinterpreted. Others said that it was Saddam Hussein, which I doubt, unless it's the opposite. And nobody really takes him seriously anymore. He was probably just some guy who took a bit too much of whatever that good shit was in 1555. But in Chainsaw Man, this is a whole different fucking story. In a reality where the very nature of fear brings forth truths that might never have existed before, the world is predicted to end in just a few months. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, symbolic figures of the world's end in the Bible, having already made their presence known. Conquest, war, famine, and famine. Wait, what the fuck? Cults, idols, religion, the young, the old, America! This is a story of an insane scope, and at the root of it all is Chainsaw Man. Dennis, who's now in school, taking everything he's learned from part 1 and finally putting it to the test. I'm so proud of him. He's gonna be a fucking superhero, for fuck's sake. But low-key, cook. If you've been alive, you would know that Chainsaw Man Part 2 is very, very controversial. Some people love it, and others think that it's a fall from grace, abandoning everything that made the series great. And I disagree with both. And not disagree as in I'm a little bitch sitting on the fence. I love and hate Chainsaw Man Part 2. Two very clear and contradictory emotions, and a feeling that I've never felt towards any piece of fiction ever, and one that doesn't come from anything as simple as flaws, but more so what the story is. With the insane amount of meta commentary in part 2, it's a feeling that I believe Fujimoto wants you to feel. That's why I have to make this video now, before the ending, while opinions are so mixed, because it all plays into this idea I have. Also, not to mention, with the release of the Reze movie, my hyperfixation is at an all-time high, and I have to make this video now before I fucking explode. Fujimoto, damn you! And if I do my job right today, by the end of this video, you will see this series in a different light, and maybe even yourself, and maybe others, and the world. After part 1 ended back in 2020, Fujimoto took a 1.5-year break where he made a lot of really fucked up, gut-wrenching, and wholesome one-shots, which I definitely will not be bringing up later. And of course, they were all amazing in their own way. One so amazing, in fact, that it later got a movie that may or may not have made me cry in front of the entire crowd of people, and it was really embarrassing, which only added to the insane amount of hype everybody had for part 2, as well as just knowing that a big part of the story was going to be about Denji in a high school setting, a nod to my dear Reze, but more than that, just be a fucking superhero, be Chainsaw Man, rah! And honestly, just thinking about Denji being a stupid version of Spider-Man is just hilarious to think about. What I'm trying to say is that the possibilities were endless, and then, before you knew it, finally, the wait was over. The first chapter was finally out, or technically chapter 98, but you get the fucking point. And we got this loser and a headless chicken called Bucky, who goes around saying, What the cluck? How does this shit even come in one's head? I don't know. Let's all be honest. We all knew somebody as bizarre as Fujimoto was never going to write a slice of life high school romance about Denji, and him introducing a whole new protagonist, or so it seemed at the time, and their origin story revolving around a headless chicken makes sense in a weird Fujimoto kind of way. And look, I'm gonna be honest with you. This might piss some people off, but I fucking love it. And more than that, I love her. Asa Mitaka is a 16-year-old high school student going to 4th East High, and she is autistic, but like really, really, really autistic. And I'm gonna keep saying that because this is the most representation I've ever had. When you first meet her, she is antisocial. She wishes people in her class would drop dead, gets pissed off at people walking, gets pissed off at people standing, gets pissed off at, oh, she's kind of real for that, but she just hates people being fucking happy and wants this headless chicken, who is actually kind of a cool guy, dead. And she might be, and I shit you not, this is not me trying to hype things up for the video, the most relatable character I've ever come across. And I am saying this as a 6'3", big, hairy, 22-year-old man. I can't even imagine how relatable she must be to others. Now, let me explain. After the class decides to let Bucky live and Asa reacts like this, she is low-key an evil bastard, we finally see that wall crumble, admitting that she was jealous, that she wants friends, and all it took was something as simple as Bucky remembering her name, seeing her cute little smile, and finally joining in with the class. I don't know, man, it heals something in me. You go, Asa, you got this! Oh. She trips, Bucky's organs splatter all over the floor, and now the whole class hates her. Also, tripping is her whole shtick, but I'm 14 and this is Chainsaw Man has always been great at writing female characters, but Asa is the first that's truly relatable. Power is a psychopath, Himeno is a PDF document, Quan Chi is a badass, Makima is the fucking Antichrist, and Kobane is, I don't know, just not relatable. Even going outside of the woman, characters like Kishibe and Aki, you understand them, but you don't feel them, you know? Emotionally, that is. I'm sure we all want to feel them physically. Even Denji, at the start, we had the whole simple life and touching boobs thing, which was relatable, I'm sorry. But the deeper we get, the more insane he becomes and less relatable. Asa is different. Her isolation feels much closer to home. Usually when you relate to a character, it's more vague, more on an emotional level, like that feeling of general sadness or loss. But with Asa, it's ultra specific. Getting pissed off at people blocking the hallway, not going to places because people are obnoxious, getting pissed off at others having what you don't have. These are things I've actually experienced in my day-to-day life, and that specificity does something more. For example, seeing the one person you're somewhat comfortable with, maybe even a friend, also relishing in the joys you can't have, fitting in, and the sinking moment of loneliness that comes with it. As someone who's had lonely periods like this, you instantly see past the facade, and you know that it's really just a self-defense mechanism. As an outsider, you try and justify why you don't fit in to avoid the pain that comes with a lack of belonging. And that's a concept that's relatable to anybody. And so when her teacher and the class president show up, and it turns out he's another PDF document, leading to the class president killing her, at her moment of death, Asa feels relieved. She wasn't responsible for tripping this time, and in the end, she wasn't so different from everybody else. Maybe she could have been happier if she had been a little more selfish. And that, my friends, is the life story of Asa Mitaka. Yep, a story about why you shouldn't hate on Headless Chicken and just not be a fucking loser. I'm obviously taking the piss. She makes a contract with Yoru, the War Devil, an ancient being and one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, out to get revenge against Chainsaw Man for killing all her children. Pachita, what the fuck were you on, bro? Who also might be the most badass looking character I've ever seen, and it is insane how a simple ass character design can make me say that. Fujimoto, you are the GOAT! Yoru and Asa are a match made in heaven, or hell, in a way I can only describe as being something straight out of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. You have this straight-laced loser who won't cross the road in the middle of the night, and Yoru who can turn anything into weapons, gaining power based on how much Asa values them. Combine them and you have a perpetual cycle of loss and power. Also, don't listen to me, kids. Listen to Asa. Always wait before you cross the road. And now, besides autism, Asa has a split personality disorder. The first few chapters of part 2 is Fujimoto exploring this dynamic. Yoru doing shit that Asa couldn't even comprehend, like asking out this hot Yoshida! Oh god. Oh god! One of my favorite things about Fujimoto is the way he switches tones in an instant. How almost instantaneously after something as stupid as this, you're whiplashed, being reminded the scope and horror of the situation that Asa is in, just like you got in part 1, but this time in a much more human sense. That being said, there's one moment specifically that probably stands as the most relatable fictional moment I've seen in recent times for me personally. Later in the story, Asa is in a position where she needs to sacrifice something she values to make a weapon strong enough to beat Chainsaw Man. Yoru suggests a cat and Asa replies very seriously saying she would rather kill a human than a cat. I have 5 cats, Smokey, Lucy, Pandy, Sins, and Susu. The last 3 books I read this year are about cats, and my entire TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter feed is of stupid cats. So yeah, I like cats. And if you were to ask me who would I rather save, a cat or a grown human, I don't know, I think I would want to pick the cat. But that being said, I've never really thought about it deeper than just fuck humans and cats are cool. But seeing Asa say that after everything she's been through, it just made me have this moment of introspection. Why do I feel this way? There's a famous novel by Genki Kawamura called If Cats Disappeared from the World. It's a short story about a young postman who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness that gives him 1 day to live. However, the devil shows up to offer him a deal. Every time he chooses to erase a concept from existence, he gets an extra day to live. Reminds me of somebody. And so he erases a lot of things, phones, clocks, movies, but he draws the line at cats. Why? Well, it's fucking obvious why. We don't even need to finish the damn book. Cats are soft. Cats are clean. Cats are adorable. Cats aren't ignorant like dogs. They're independent. Cats choose who they love, and that choice makes their affection feel more real, more earned, more valuable. And most of all, cats, unlike people, have no malice. Cat might scratch you, sure, but it'll never hurt you where it really matters. So no wonder he wouldn't want to erase them, even at the cost of his life. But for some reason, now thinking about it makes me feel sad. I don't know, I'm sad that I feel this way. But speaking of cats, I fucking love how Denji is introduced in part 2. Him saving the cat over the people is the most Denji thing ever, but in a way that shows that he's changed. A nod to the Hayakawa family. God, it's so beautiful. I think it was a great decision to introduce Denji in part 2 after spending time away from him, not only to give Asa more significance to the story, but also to get a more casual perspective of how Chainsaw Man is seen in this world. And as you would expect, it's not as simple as everyone fawning over him like he thought it would be at the end of part 1, because once again, dreams are never what they're made out to be. People like Asa catch on to shenanigans of only saving women, and rumors are going around saying that he eats people, which isn't exactly wrong. But nonetheless, him being needed and loved is enough to keep him naively happy. What a loser. And so unlike the typical superhero who tries to keep his secret and identity, Denji is trying to get caught, which seems stupid at first, but I'm not gonna lie, when you think about it, I mean, how do you even go about revealing your identity? This is the 90s, no smartphones, internet, or social media yet. It's really by word of mouth if you can't get on TV. One of my favorite moments in early part 2 is when Denji leaves Yoshida, literally speechless because he's so fucking dumb. And Yoshida thinks he's smart, but he's not smart. You're a fucking dumb bastard and you're dealing with Denji. Also, side note, Yoshida and Denji's dynamic is one of my favorite things in part 2, and it's deeper than you think, and we'll get into that in a bit. But the important thing to note is that looking at his situation from outside the box, not much has changed. He's still broke, still willing to do pretty much anything for money, even if now he's got a bit more of an attitude about it, and still alone. Almost. The only clear and most important change from part 1, the proof that Denji has grown, is his relationship with Nayuta. He understands how important she is, and he is now consciously prioritizing her above everything else, even his dreams, creating a really cute, wholesome older brother and sister dynamic. Wow, I hope it stays this way. And that makes sense. The entire point of part 1 was that dreams and life itself are never what we idealize them to be. Being Chainsaw Man might still sound appealing, but actually living as him comes with a cost. As Fujimoto says, being worshipped as an idol has a scary side to it. A big part of Fujimoto's works has always been this almost mockery of fan culture. We've seen it in works like Fire Punch, and even with Makima at the end of part 1, his stories blurring the line between worshipping deities and idealizing people, expressing how dangerous of a concept that is, especially when we don't fully understand them, showing that at its core, it's also reflective of ignorance. But that being said, the example I want to focus on specifically is a one-shot called Just Listen to the Song that was written by Fujimoto. The story revolves around a kid who makes a song confessing his love to a girl and posts it on YouTube. He gets rejected, but it ends up going viral, and for some reason people think it's really #deep. It's a critique on gun culture in America, a song blurring the line between ghosts and humans, Skyfish, and a song about denying the existence of God. Obviously this kid didn't think of any of those things, but caught up in all the hype and expectations, he releases another song called Just Listen to the Song, and it ends up being a disappointment, meeting nobody's expectations and leading to him just deleting all of his songs. I have to admit something kind of embarrassing. When this first came out, it really pissed me off. Not only did it feel like it was Fujimoto invalidating his work, but it also felt like it was him invalidating me, insinuating the one thing someone could say that would make me want to punch them in the fucking face. It's not that deep, bro. Astronauts, guns, paintings, movies, America! It was like he was saying that all of this was just for the shits of it, and because I am an entitled little fanboy, I took it personally. And it's not just me. To this day, people use this one shot to say that this is Fujimoto saying his work is not deep, and it's a sentiment that has affected people's outlook on part 2. However, after rereading it a couple of years later, I see that if I just put my entitlement to the side, all I had to do was look at the beautiful closing moments of the one shot, with the girl he actually wrote the song for showing that she understood it even if the rest of the world didn't. And that should be enough. In the build up to this video, I came across this wonderful creator who makes a video sharing a different perspective that quite honestly opened my eyes about both this one shot and part 2 as a whole. Things like playing the song backwards or seeing a ghost is irrelevant to the heart of the story, and that this one shot is Fujimoto expressing his fears and frustration as an artist. This makes perfect sense, especially knowing this was made as he was preparing to make part 2, and now it feels like Fujimoto is throwing all of that onto Denji. Other people will impose things onto the characters. Yes, when that happens, even if you don't like it, you have to answer them and it becomes a part of your self-image. And in Chainsaw Man, this applies to Chainsaw Man. It is an idea or a thing that keeps getting twisted all throughout, and we see Denji struggle around it. Serena brings up a fucking phenomenal example, how in panels like this, you have people literally reacting to Chainsaw Man like they are reacting to Chainsaw Man the manga. He's a bad influence. He's a badass. He's a devil. He needs to die. Chainsaw Man doesn't really exist. It's American propaganda. Chainsaw Man is too gory for kids. I don't like him because I'm racist. And viral Japanese tweets saying that these are like exact people they've met in real life adds to how meta this shit is. And so it's clear what part of Fujimoto is in part 2. If part 1 was about Fujimoto's experience of being stuck in a small little apartment in Tokyo, following orders like a dog, then part 2 is about the struggles of being an artist, the expectations that come with it, the people who steal from you, the lack of belonging. Chainsaw Man part 2 isn't just a continuation, it's a story about identity. A story not about dreams or the reality of life, but you, Asa, being the other side of that. And so basically now, you've got this depressed, dumb himbo teenager who just wants everyone to like him, specifically woman, and then you've got this neurodivergent, hyperlogical, straight-laced loner who deep down also just wants everyone to like her. I wonder what happens when you throw those two together. Like I mentioned earlier, since Asa refuses to sacrifice a cat, she now has to pick a human to turn into a weapon. And even for somebody that hates people, this is hard. But then this guy comes along selling used cigarettes to homeless people, who is also going around claiming to be Chainsaw Man. And I mean, what the fuck? This loser can't be Chainsaw Man. It's like saying Bruce Wayne is Batman. It's like saying this loser is Spider-Man. And it's like saying Saddam Hussein is the prophecy of doom, who very quickly agrees to go on a date. God, he's so adorable in a sad way. I want him to be happy so bad. As someone that just finished making an unnecessarily long video about romance anime, I can confidently say that this is the stupidest date I've ever seen. And stupid, not crazy. Crazy, we know who that goes to. It starts off with Asa trying to use her charm to get Denji to like her by telling him about Starfish. A lot about Starfish. Too much about Starfish. And I think what kills me the most about this is that she genuinely thinks this will work. God, the second-hand embarrassment. She's so fucking autistic. I love her. But yeah, he is not impressed. And you know it's bad when Denji is looking like this. But you know what? Shout out Denji. Shout out Denji for finally standing up for himself. This is the first real sign that Denji wants autonomy in a romantic sense. And Asa needs to respect that. And so after Asa starts crashing out, trying to justify why her studying starfish facts in the library didn't work, they get into an ADHD versus autism fight, shouting, "Go to hell" at each other, which definitely won't have any severe implications later in the story. And in parallel to part 1, the Eternity Devil comes and now they're stuck in an aquarium with these losers and Yoshida. With these losers and Fami. But Asa is here to save the day with her NEC 90s flip phone. For fuck's sake. What Chainsaw Man does so well is give us these moments where the characters keep making the same mistakes over and over again in ways that feel funny but weirdly stomach turning and real. I don't know, it's so unconventional but it hits hard every time. And now with Asa, we get this genuinely sad moment where her fragile ego, that false sense of confidence she tries so hard to hold on to, just crumbles again. But out of that comes something wonderful. Denji sits down beside her in the water and starts talking, really talking, cheering her up, and letting Asa see what we've always known about Denji, that he's a real charming, sweet guy, and more than just Chainsaw Man. Somebody who's willing to accept everybody for who they are, no matter how messed up they might be. And this right here is why Asa and Denji is such an amazing ship, especially in a shonen series, where female characters usually only exist as extensions of men. Denji and Asa are different and dysfunctional, but they complement each other without being dependent on one another. Asa is an overthinker, constantly going insane over every little detail and what people think of her, and Dennis is a himbo that craves attention from others in the form of woman and sex. And yet they're still so similar in that they're both rejects that have been cast out of society for one reason or another, but keep trying to fit in a world that doesn't let them. And it's because of Denji's acceptance, that total acceptance of others, that Asa starts to open up. His honesty is exactly what she needs in a world that makes her feel so fucked up. My favorite example of this being how everyone judged her for not liking fish because they look too dead. But Denji doesn't even question it, instead offering to eat starfish. And Denji's ability to accept people, especially women, for who they are, that's always been his special little thing. Or should I say his riz. Is that how you use the word? I don't know. And him referencing power stop. I can't fucking do this. This leads to probably my favorite moment in early part 2, Asa and Denji running around the aquarium, and it's moments like these that just put a big fat grin on my face, the same way it did when Power and Denji were bullying Arki. Seeing losers trying to interact has to be one of the funniest things ever, and also so wholesome. And it is kind of absurd that we've never had this type of autistic levels of interactions in any piece of media that I can think of, but Fujimoto fucking does it. And I don't care. I know someone's going to be in the comment section saying, oh no, this show, no they don't. That show doesn't do it. Not like Fujimoto does. Also, just a quick warning, I am a huge Asa Den shipper, so if I'm biased, I apologize in advance. And on top of that, I can't express how much I love this early part of Chainsaw Man Part 2. The Devil Hunter Club, the mystery of who the fuck this chainsaw clone is. Her, Nayuta and Denji's relationship. Penguins, fucking penguins. The way Fujimoto makes these two feel like actual high schoolers. Awkward, hormonal, trying to act normal in a batshit crazy world. It's just perfect. And then I start to fucking hate this series. But before we get into that, I want to talk about why Chainsaw Man Part 2 is controversial, aka its flaws, because that is a precursor to hatred, but importantly, not the cause. There are a lot of things that people have issues with that, trust me, we will get into, but one of the biggest controversies surrounding Part 2 is that the side characters aren't particularly good, and it makes sense that this would be such a huge complaint because of course that is one of the things that made part 1 so special. Fuji is a freak of nature when it comes to his pacing, somehow getting us attached to characters in almost no time, whilst feeling like they have the same amount of presence as characters that have been there for over 100 chapters. But part 2 just doesn't do that. Outside of Asa, which I don't even know if you can call her a side character anymore since I thought she was going to be the protagonist, the new cast is just The President Haruka, I have a feeling, will be a lot more compelling in the anime, but as of now, he has some good moments, and I think the point of his character is to show somebody growing out of the curse of fandom and borderline worship to be their own person, so I guess he's good. Kobane's brother is just a worse version of Kobane that's there and feels like more of a cameo than an actual character. I really hope I eat my words later on. This big bastard who... I don't know why I actually really like him, but he's fucking useless. He doesn't do anything. There's this sword guy, Miri, who's one of the hybrid weapons from part 1, who I actually initially really liked. Him coming into Denji's life and being genuinely grateful for him was so heartfelt, and it also felt reminiscent of how in a desperate attempt to be our own person, escape society, we can end up being slaves to something else. And then he goes nowhere. He just disappears for most of the fucking story, and I can only hope he gets a good conclusion later on, and eat my words. And this applies to most of the side characters in part 2, except for except for 3, which I promise I will be talking about later, so just be patient. But I think the character that has really rubbed me the wrong way is Quan Chi. Don't get it twisted, I fucking cried when Quan Chi returned, because it happened at a time where another gay white-haired person had just died. I miss you. But she does nothing. She has 2 lines and a couple of badass moments, and that's it. And it's such a shame that a character that for many people was one of the most interesting and fucking beloved things in part 1 to come back and be nothing other than cool. Where's the heart? Why even bring her back? Now, context is important here. I am making this video before the ending of part 2, so this could easily be a really cool moment later on, or even in part 3 if we get that. But it sucks to be in a situation saying, oh, it depends how their character ends, when I knew that I fucking loved most of the part 1 characters as soon as I met them. Kishibe also hasn't appeared yet. I don't know what's going on with him. He said at the end of part 1 he was going to be busy, so maybe it's set up for him to return in the ending or part 3, but you know, that's just speculation, and I fucking miss him. Now, credit where credit is due. The one character whose return I love, and I actually think Fujimoto has done a phenomenal job with, is Katana Man. Ever since he's come back, he has been a pleasure to read. I actually think him and Denji's interactions have been so funny. My favorite being when he offers to take him to a bathhouse. I've always had a thing for the delinquent archetype, which I feel like both kind of fall into. And the reason I love them is because I'm somewhat of a delinquent myself. No, I actually got bullied. Shout out to the GOAT Aaron from Psyche K. But more specifically, I think the reason for this love is because Katana Man actually does something. He develops and builds a new relationship for us to care for. And little things like him being a fan of Asa's poems are these little extra quirks that attach us to him, showing us a side that we never got to see before. But that doesn't seem to be something we're getting a lot of in part 2. And it's hard to not look at the characters in part 1 and not feel a little bit empty. Maybe that's the point. We felt so close to them because we knew their deepest, darkest secrets, fears, and exceptions. In part 2, the characters don't have that, and it's why we don't feel as attached to them. But I think there's a purposeful reason for that. AKA, I'm 14 and this is deeper than you think. I want to make it clear that I still stand by many of my criticisms of how Fujimoto has approached the characters in part 2 compared to how he dealt with them in part 1. But that doesn't contradict the fact that there's a reason we almost feel a kind of disdain towards them. Fujimoto isn't trying to tell the same story he did in part 1. These characters are kids. They don't have clear ambitions, priorities, or dreams. They're just trying to figure out who they are, to be something. Because of that, we're naturally gonna have very different feelings towards them than the empathy we did towards the adults in part 1 who were struggling to survive in a cruel, fucked up world. For example, Yuko is a character that is introduced early in part 2. She helps Asa by offering her shoes after her bullies threw meat on them, and this leads to a really beautiful moment of Asa bonding with somebody else and making a new friend. However, later it becomes horrifying. We later find out that Yuko made a deal with the Justice Devil to end all of Asa's problems. And in a world that feels so grounded, this is genuinely horrifying to see. Reminiscent of the fucked up things we see people do in the real world, forcing Asa into a fight with her. However, we find out after that it's because she wanted to be like Chainsaw Man, wanted everybody to love her, that she ended up making this stupid deal. There's a theme that I brought up earlier in Chainsaw Man of people trying to copy Denji, but why? Why do people copy others? I think it all goes back to Denji and the little shack from part 1. One of the reasons why part 1 became so popular almost instantly was because of how overdue a character like Denji was, especially in the shonen demographic. Chainsaw Man came out in a time where people were getting really bored of the same old shonen formula, with the MC having this larger than life goal to chase. The idea having originated during Japan's economic boom in the 70s and 80s, a period where the country thrived economically, and a time where citizens were being promised that with hard work and determination, any dream can be achieved. The change from shonen stories like Fist of the North Star that were more grim and episodic, to series like Dragon Ball about progression, signifying that change in attitude. And it's a change that has remained long past the economic boom, even into the lost decade during the 90s, where the exact opposite happened. Citizens, specifically young people, were depressed, broke, and ambitiousless, no longer having the same opportunities that the previous generation did. And with that ambitiousness comes this sense of emptiness that we saw a lot of in part 1. Desperately trying to have a dream, a goal, a purpose in a world that doesn't let you is suffocating. And at that point, all you can do is die slowly or rebel, which is why fucking psychopaths like Sid Vicious became popular in the 90s, representing that rebellious and anti-establishment attitude they had, and also why nihilistic doom prophecies like the one Nostradamus came up with was so popular at the time. Also some weird form of rebellion by hoping the world gets blown the fuck up. That's why Denji was so popular to us and the people who grew up in the 90s. He is that struggle and in turn rebellious attitude being shown to us so many years later. But in a full circle meta way, the characters are now experiencing this in part 2. Seeing Chainsaw Man on TV, somebody radiating all that anti-establishment and rebellious energy the fucking Sex Pistols had, makes them feel seen. But with that comes a sense of longing. When you look at somebody like Chainsaw Man, you are seeing somebody who fights for something, somebody who has a purpose and a place in the world. You want that, and so you try to imitate it in an attempt to fill that hole inside. And it's pathetic. It's pathetic seeing somebody copy others. It's pathetic seeing somebody have no sense of identity, and it's pathetic seeing somebody bring nothing new to the world. But it's relatable. And that relatability is jarring. And so yes, we're not going to have that same underdog appeal as someone like Arky, who's out here chasing revenge in this completely batshit insane world, but they're still just as relatable, just in a different way. And this is why, even if not perfect, I actually love the side characters in Chainsaw Man Part 2. However, I understand that maybe Fujimoto could have spent more time developing them. But on the other hand, it's for this exact reason that I absolutely love the villains in Part 2, because they take this idea to the fucking extreme. But before we get into that, I feel like there's one criticism I have to address. To be frank, I really did not want to bring this up, but at this point, it's kind of undeniable. There's been a decline in Fujimoto's art. Fujimoto's art, in terms of how pretty it is, has never really been the selling point. It is not highly detailed or expressive, even compared to weekly authors like Horikoshi, and on the other hand, it doesn't have the strong choreography to make up for it, like stories such as JJK. And that's a thing that he's also expressed frustration at, to the point that he may or may not have threatened to destroy his art school. However, it's how he manipulates the medium that's not only appealing, but also makes his style of writing work. However, what's important to understand is how pivotal his assistants are to this process. The life of a weekly manga author is brutal. In a recent interview, Fujimoto mentioned that he barely gets any sleep, to the point that he once fell asleep at the front door. And hearing stuff like this, it's genuinely heartbreaking. His assistants who help with the background and general support are probably the only reason he's able to keep going. Fujimoto in Part 1 and Fire Punch was in a really unique situation. Many of his assistants were actually older and more experienced than he was, giving him a lot of guidance and support. These include the authors of Dan Da Dan, Hell's Paradise, and Spy Family, just to name a few. But as you've probably seen or heard with how popular these series fucking are, many of those assistants have moved on, and the decline in his art might just be a reflection of him trying to survive, now having either less assistants or assistants with much less experience. And so my guess is that this change in art style is him doing what he can without pushing himself to the point that he loses years of his life, like we've seen so many times before. And choosing to go for less detail isn't an uncommon thing. Even recently, we saw towards the end of JJK how the line art got worse, with Gege taking more and more breaks towards the ending as his health was in jeopardy. With Fujimoto, the best way to describe how it's changed is that now it feels like he's drawing on a whiteboard, the lines are thicker with less detail and just feels way closer to a storyboard than a refined chapter. And of course, this is not purely a decline in art. There has been a clear change in Fujimoto's art style, and this recent art of Reze that he made from the movie, which, my god, Fujimoto, I fucking hate you, shows that this new art style can be just as, if not even prettier than part 1's, if he's actually given the time to let it flourish. However, what's most important is that he's still using his art in unique and creative ways. For example, a fucking chainsaw motorbike, batshit insane character designs, cool ass blood transitions, the entire fucking state of Michigan collapsing, and on that note, all of Yoru's bloody weapons. They're all so damn cool and unique. Nuclear fucking punches that break the fabric of time and space. Yoru learning about the power of friendship. God, it's so good. It's so good. It's even more creative than part 1. It's just such a shame that he doesn't have the time to add more detail and make it look better. And I truly hope that being able to release some chapters bi-weekly on Jump Plus helps, but I still worry for him, and it's why I can't bring myself to see this art decline as a serious flaw. But there's one criticism I've heard that I completely fucking disagree with, and that is the villains being worse. In Chainsaw Man Part 1, the antagonists were personal, playing on your most intimate fears. They were horrifying and also weirdly attractive, and not just in a sexual way necessarily, but in how we were drawn to them conceptually. Fear of the dark, fear of the future, fear of being controlled. However, in Chainsaw Man Part 2, the villains are more existential, and instead of fear and horror, they now evoke this hatred and contempt. And to me, the biggest example of that is Barham, a character that I genuinely love, but also fucking despise, and it's a feeling that I have not felt since reading Berserk. Barham made a brief appearance in part 1 as one of the weapon hybrids, specifically a flamethrower, alongside the rest of Makima's bitches, and I am 99% sure he is based on this dipshit from Pulp Fiction. But now in part 2, he's taken on the role of being one of the central antagonists. His goal, to carry out Makima's will, saving humanity by wiping out the 4 horsemen and defeating the Great King of Terror. And to do this, we see Barham carry out Fami's plan of creating a cult around Chainsaw Man, indoctrinating what seems to be specifically young people. The purpose of the cult, to make people fear Chainsaw Man so he grows strong enough to fight this king, and so he turns most of his followers into mindless chainsaw zombies, leaving hundreds of thousands wreaking havoc all over the world, and ultimately destroying everything Denji's built. One of Denji's biggest struggles all throughout Chainsaw Man is how he's dehumanized to just Chainsaw Man, this figure that's being twisted by others, to some a god to be worshipped and to others a demon to be feared. Barham is the ultimate personification of that. Makima was a slow, haunting reveal. Barham is a force of chaos, like, I don't know, fucking Homelander. You shake every time you see him on screen. He violates, hurts, and takes away Denji's right to being a human being at every possible turn. And unlike Makima, he doesn't hide what he intends to do. There is no underlying appeal or familiarity like with Katana Man, Reze, or Makima. To Denji, he just does it for the love of the game. And actually having Denji deal with somebody he genuinely despises, hates, is something new, and in turn brings out a different side of him. But there's also something a little bit deeper here. When I see Barham laughing and making facial expressions like this, it feels unsettling, almost uncanny, like he's pretending to be human, pretending to feel something. It's only when he speaks to Denji that you see he isn't completely apathetic. It's more like he's mocking him, and you can feel this underlying spite he has specifically towards Denji. And so the question becomes, why? Well, Denji and Barham are actually two sides of the same coin. On paper, their characteristics are very similar. Both make jokes, both are good at what they do because of their ability to relish in the insanity of things, and both genuinely love Makima. But one stopped following her whilst the other didn't. Her control persists even after death and shows that he didn't need to be controlled in the first place, or maybe he never was. And the uncomfortable truth is that we are a lot closer to Barham than we might think. The inherent idea of worship is that we believe in something that allows us to skip through the process of finding meaning in the little things and justify our existence for a higher purpose. And so when this idea gets broken, this place we find solace in is taken away from us, we respond with either moving on or carrying on the idea by any means necessary, becoming radical. And so if Denji's ignorance in part 1 is individual, Barham's is global, society's ignorance. The refusal to question things, the lack of individuality, looking at others' strengths instead of relying on your own. Every criticism thrown at Barham is one that can be thrown at the state of society and how people flock like sheeps. He must carry on Makima's will, save the world, and justify his worship. The world would have been a better place if they had all just listened to Makima. gotten rid of everything bad and lived blissfully. Therefore, the person that took that away must pay the price. His god has abandoned him and now he must get revenge. Barham is that painting on Makima's wall, literally paralleling Lucifer in the fallen angel painting. Whilst Denji moves on like the angels, Barham stays, suffering, waiting and ready. His name literally meaning scale, symbolizing that he is Denji's punishment. Back in part 1, Makima promised to kill anyone that ever got close to Denji throughout his life, and Barham is a reminder that this will always be the case. Chapter 151 is one that I can only describe as being on par with some of the most horrific moments in Chainsaw Man, and that's really saying something. People now fear Chainsaw Man, they despise Chainsaw Man, faces twisted with hatred, torches blazing, they hunt him down with pitchforks and fire, the same way villagers once hunted witches centuries ago. And now, once again, he stands at a crossroads, live a normal life or be Chainsaw Man, but this time at the cost of Nayuta's life. And here he decides that, you know what, maybe being Chainsaw Man isn't all that. Nayuta has consistently been the priority for Denji, and here is no different. All he can think about now is going home to feed the pets. He has his ordinary life that he dreamed of. Pochita even coming to congratulate him. It's okay to give up on dreams. It's okay to be satisfied with Nayuta, the dogs and sweet little Meowie. That is all he needs. What's next? I want to be Chainsaw Man. He awakens to see his apartment burning, his home, his belongings, the dogs, Meowie. His memories all gone, again with Barham there, looking down, mocking him. Fujimoto not showing the pets dying adds so much to the surrealness of this moment, because it really makes you question, is this really fucking happening? And to be honest, I still question it every now and then, but more importantly, it makes you ask the question, what was the point of everything? But before you even get a chance to think, Denji goes from making a face of pure disgust and rage to laughing, thanking them for giving him an excuse to be Chainsaw Man. And it's here you realise what the most fucked up part of his character is. Since the start of part 2, Denji has been different. Yes, he shows moments of growth, moments of not growth, but at first glance, he's still Denji. However, when you look a little bit deeper at him, something's off. His eyes are sagged, back hunched forward like he's dragging himself along, and he rarely smiles. He's tired. We see at the end of part 1, Denji isn't ignorant anymore. He knows what he wants, and more importantly, what his priorities are. But that almost makes his actions here worse. He knows what hurts him, and so instead of unconsciously forgetting it or trying to be ignorant, he now uses other methods to get through his day-to-day life without completely crumbling. Specifically, violence on others and violence on Denji, all whilst laughing and relishing in it, all of which pointing to the idea that Denji has replaced ignorance with avoidance. He doesn't want to confront his memories, confront his desires, nor confront himself. And so just like he ruins himself to avoid thinking about power and Arki, he desperately wants to have in hopes of filling that emptiness inside of him, the emptiness that Chainsaw Man can't fill. And it is precisely because of the horny nature of this cycle that has made him the most controversial thing about part 2. People think that Fujimoto has ruined his character, and I've even seen some people put him in the same category as Mineta from MHA, and you are smoking fucking crack if you think they are the same. There's this line from one of Fujimoto's interviews that really sticks out to me, and it was a response to asking why Denji still loved Makima even after she made it clear that she never once even looked at him. It's a bit long, so buckle up. I was watching a documentary about an orphanage, and the children were almost all waiting for their mothers. Even when they got to the high school age, they were still waiting the whole time. Even when in theory, they don't know anything about their mothers, a woman close to them, for example the dorm mother, may overlap with the mother figure in their mind. When that person quits her job and has to leave, the child may fill their notebook with line after line of "don't go." As long as a child can't fill the role of a mother who only loves me, he may keep looking for that forever. I put this feeling into Denji's character. Makima takes that vulnerability, the hole Denji has in his life of not having a loving figure, and molds it into a weapon, grooming him into her desired being. And it's for that reason, even when he does kill her, he doesn't stop loving her. and that search for intimacy was never going to just disappear. Denji is a rarity in modern media. He is an actual portrayal of male victimhood, something that is not taken seriously in the slightest. The most recent example coming from Invincible, which I won't say for spoiler purposes, but the fact that people make jokes about it is disgusting and goes to show my point. Denji is someone who's gone through textbook abuse, and with all of his unresolved trauma, he's still searching for intimacy with others in the form of because deep down, he feels like nobody truly loves him for who he is outside of a familial sense. But when he remembers Makima, Reze and Asa, it's never purely in a sexual way. It's about the emotional bond he shared with them. When he says he doesn't want to help destroy humanity because Asa was the first person who didn't hurt him when they kissed, that shows what he really values deep down and how easily he caves when someone finally treats him with genuine kindness. For example, in chapter 137, we are introduced to Fumiko, a girl that Yoshida introduces to Denji to make him feel better. She instantly starts touching his private parts, but Denji does something that shows growth. He says it's weird for a girl he just met to be making moves on him. It's clearly a trap and that she should have some damn self-respect. Of course, this didn't happen, and he imagined it all in his head. Now, this was the moment where a lot of part 2 hate really started coming about. People were claiming his character regressed and that this isn't good writing, but I'm going to respond to that respectfully by saying, why the fuck would he suddenly develop now of all places? He is at one of the lowest points in his life, having to give up on his dream again, and just like Yuko, just like Haruka, and just like Asa is empty. Desperately searching for meaning, something to fill that hole, and so he once again turns to the only thing he's ever known, his drive, and in turn his hope for a connection. And the idea of needing something to feel alive can even be seen later when he's beating people to death with a bat. Look at his face here. We have never seen Denji smile like this for the entirety of part 2. He looks free and relieved, but in a twisted way. And so just like the violence, Denji's sexual behavior isn't regression, it's a reflection of trauma. This is literally a scene of Denji crying because fucking Yoru shows him sexual attention. Like, how is this not clear? But I don't think the problem really is the quote-unquote regression. It's not a regression. The guy never got over his drive, so how the fuck can it be regression? I don't know. Or whatever you want to call this, because so many stories take their characters back to square one over and over again to make a bigger point, and it's good. I think what this is really about is the uncomfortability of topics like this and the instant criticism that comes with it. And this of course brings up a question. Why is it not okay for Fujimoto to tell his story like this? Why is it not okay for Denji's struggles to revolve around this topic? Why is it wrong for a child that has known nothing but suffering most of his life to be so fucked up that the only way he thinks he can validate his existence is through somebody else proving that he can be loved? Even if it's just why are you putting him in a box just like the characters in the series? Funnily enough, the best example in my opinion of the problematic nature of this is Fumiko, who is actually 22 and therefore also a PDF docu. We recently found out that she is actually contracted to the STD devil. With its power, any human who has sex with Fumiko becomes Fumiko, a deal that she made when she was 14. Now, as you can guess, the reaction to this was not great, and this happening a chapter after Fami revealed that she is actually called Lil D was also not great. People were calling him unserious, a troll, yada yada yada. But once again, one moment to think about what the implications of Fumiko being contracted to the STD devil is, reveals something a lot more heartbreaking. STDs aren't something that's taken seriously or even spoken about in Japan whatsoever. Serena makes a wonderful TikTok about this subject, explaining how a lot of people don't even know what STDs are and just blame it on foreigners. And after doing a little bit more research, this shit is kinda fucking insane. In Emi Yokoyama's article, Shedding More Light on Sexually Transmitted Infections in Japan, she talks about how some students, even those in nursing school, had never actually seen a condom until their lessons on STIs. Like, how is that even possible? And this is especially important to bring up now when so many people in Japan suffer from it. Fumiko being only 14 also reflects a larger issue in the 90s, when many young girls in Japan were exploited in red light districts, using their body as avenue for money, objectified, and with that risking getting STIs and STDs. Fumiko now embodying the consequences of that exploitation. The point I'm trying to make is that if you have any criticisms, of course they're totally valid, but if it comes down to your discomfort from these topics that Fujimoto explores, I think it's worth considering what he's trying to say through Denji's inability to express himself freely as Chainsaw Man or Denji. And so the question now is why? Why does he have to rely on these two things? Well, I think it comes down to an idea I have about Denji, that he has not properly grieved once in his life. What's important to understand is that Denji's biggest flaw or weakness has always been his guilt. What pushed him over the edge wasn't Aki's death, wasn't Power's death, wasn't finding out that the woman he loved had constructed their entire relationship to ruin him. It was remembering that he was the one that killed his father, and that in turn, he didn't deserve happiness. And that is not a sentiment that disappears in part 2. In fact, it gets worse, much worse, to the point that he truly and utterly hates himself. Even when the world twists his identity, beliefs, and doesn't let him be a person, deep down, he can't bring himself to fight it. His only salvation being the hope that he's able to give Nayuta the happy life that wasn't given. There's this story about another cannibalist called Sagawa Issei. He came from a wealthy family and studied literature, and in 1981, while studying in Paris, he invited a woman over to his apartment where he shot and killed her. After her death, he cannibalized parts of her body over the next few days until he was eventually caught by French police when he tried to dispose of her remains. Eventually, Sagawa was declared legally insane in France and sent to a mental institution, and later sent back to Japan, where he was soon released because of his connection to his wealthy parents. However, to the surprise of everyone, he became famous in Japan, giving interviews, writing books, appearing in TV, and even having mangas made about him. And in the end, he never went back to prison, living freely for decades until he finally died in 2022. But the most haunting thing he's ever said was his answer to the question, "What do humans taste like?" Tuna, he says. This story says a lot of things to me, but mainly how in the end, it doesn't really matter what you do, no matter how disgusting and evil it is. If people find you fascinating enough, they will turn you into a figure, whether that's a hero, a god, a villain, or merchandise. And that in the end, nobody has control over how they are perceived by others. Denji will never be the Chainsaw Man he idealized, reiterating again that Denji isn't a person to these people. One of the most stomach-turning moments in the manga is this panel. It's not gory, it's not bloody, in the world of Chainsaw Man anyways. It's just Denji sleeping, having his body parts removed surgically, and it just breaks my heart. It is the life experience of Denji in one panel. It's so dark, so grim, and we later find out Denji has now lost everything again. The scene where Denji is dissected is not absurd or comedic, it's visceral, and I think it reflects how he feels about himself. But more than anything, we find out that the biggest person dehumanizing Denji is Denji. The only thing he has left is his guilt that he can't confront and his loss that he can't grieve. And since he can no longer forcefully forget his pain, he can only erase anything associated with it. Whenever Denji is close to a painful memory, Pochita kills that memory. Mouths, ears, snow, coffee, anything associated with what he is avoiding. But his refusal, inability to confront grief and pain is the very source of his anguish. To live without understanding yourself is hell. But I think what best shows this is his relationship with Yoshida, a character that I have been purposefully avoiding bringing up until now. I don't know how else to describe it, but Yoshida is a bit of a fucking weirdo. He has a facial expression that rarely changes until Denji just bees Denji, and he says that he doesn't want Denji to be Chainsaw Man except for a few moments where he questions if Denji could really kill the Death Devil. For a long time it was hard to figure out if he was an antagonist or just a guy that genuinely wanted to help Denji, and his sassy piece of shit attitude doesn't help. His smile pisses me off. But then, before you know it, he just dies, saying that he is a switch and blowing up. But Barum dies a painful fucking death! But it's in the last conversation they have together that made something in Chainsaw Man Part 2 just click for me. In his last conversation, standing in the rain, he says that he wanted to see the school one last time, saying that he's grateful for Denji, that he was able to come here because of him. He was reluctant about the idea from public safety to watch over Denji in school, but in the end it turned out to be a pretty good role. This moment I think says a lot about Yoshida and lets me fill in the gaps about his character. My guess is that Yoshida was probably taken in by public safety at a very young age, and given his skill of being able to stand toe to toe with Quan Chi and having a weirdly cosmically powered octopus devil means that he's been trained thoroughly, probably never getting the chance to experience a normal life, and so he empathizes and relates to Denji. Hearing that this was all Denji wanted in part 1, he probably went into part 2, of course trying to control him, but also I think genuinely wanting to help him, because I think deep down he also wants the same thing. And it's why he gets so pissed off at Denji now trying to be Chainsaw Man, because he can't understand why. Even though Yoshida was a weirdo, his interactions with Denji were still really funny. And even though he was a nuisance a lot of the time, he was still the closest thing Denji had to just a friend. And as they have pizza together and Yoshida watches, saying that he just likes to watch people eat, I am once again reminded of why I think he's a fucking weirdo. But he's like another weirdo we know, and Denji notices that and smiles before Yoshida passes away. And of course he was raging at Barham, but I really think it's mainly the loss of Yoshida that pushes him over the edge and turns him into Chainsaw Man again. Denji realizes here that he's lost another friend without appreciating them in time. Like Aki, like Power, and like Nayuta, Yoshida becomes another regret that Denji can't process until it's too late. By the end of part 1, Denji understood life's duality, joy and pain, love and loss. But understanding isn't healing. He never confronted his grief. He accepted life, but he never accepted himself. And in part 2, he's still chasing something to fill that hole. His laughter amidst fire, his lust, his craving for pain, and his longing for intimacy. It's all him trying to feel alive, trying to feel something. He can't self-actualize because he can't stop running away. Fujimoto's message is brutally honest. There is no perfect healing, no grand revelation. Life doesn't get better. Even when we understand that the world is both cruel and beautiful, we will still fall short again and again. And it's that honesty, that there is no grand conclusion about life you get. Even if it's not dreams, you will keep suffering, having moments of regression and losing those you love. That is what makes me hate Chainsaw Man Part 2, because it makes me hate myself. But that is just one of two sides. This is why I hate Part 2 more on a personal micro level. Part 2 also has something to say outside of that. Fujimoto does this really cool thing where he references a lot of historic paintings all throughout his works, and in Chainsaw Man, examples of this include Paradise Lost, The Fallen Angel, Mars Resting, Narcissus, and my personal favourite, Napoleon Crossing the Alps. But there's one reference that sticks out to me the most. There's a painting by an artist called Francisco Goya that is considered by many to be the most disturbing painting of all time. The painting itself depicts the Greek titan Kronos devouring his son. According to the mythology, Kronos was told that one day one of his children would overthrow him, just as he had done with his father, and so out of fear, he swallowed each of his children as they were born. Now, just that alone makes it pretty fucking scary, as well as Kronos, who is usually depicted like this, being depicted like this. But what makes this painting really horrifying is the context behind it. This is one of Goya's black paintings that he made for his mansion. He never made it for anyone but himself, and they were able to find it only years after his death. You are not meant to be seeing this. What's more, he actually made this whilst he was going deaf. And when you compare that to his earlier paintings, you can see how much more grim his worldview was by the end of his life. Now, I can keep going about how fucking creepy the circumstances behind this painting was, how the mansion he did it in was called the House of the Death by the person who lived there before him, how he had 7 children, 6 of which died before they were adults, etc. But what I really want to focus on is the time it was made in. Spain was in chaos after Napoleon had invaded, as some believe Nostradamus predicted, and the country was torn apart by war and ignorance. Goya, who had seen the brutality of the invasion firsthand, grew increasingly disgusted by the stupidity and superstition of the people, something he'd already criticized earlier in his series Los Caprichos. He saw a society too blind to save itself. During the war, artists would still paint battle scenes as noble and heroic, but Goya didn't. He showed them as horrific, senseless, and unjust. And when Napoleon's forces were finally pushed out, the restoration of the monarchy crushed any hope of progress. And so whatever optimism he had was gone. It's out of this despair precisely that his paintings were born. If you're wondering why I'm bringing this up, well, it's a painting that Fujimoto references earlier in the series, as we are introduced to the horror of devils again, specifically how dangerous they are to humans. And you can make parallels to a lot of different things in part 2, but what I want to focus on is this idea of the old devouring the young. It's so ugly, refusing to be forgotten and ruining the world, ruining us as a result. But this is precisely what Yoru is to me. Yoru is this painting. She is a being that has probably been around since the third human came about, a being relishing in war and conflict throughout the ages, an ancient concept that keeps devouring the young. Lines like this, where she says that children are there to be used by their mother, embody the horrifying nature of this painting. And although Yoru can be fun, we are reminded every now and then just how despicable of a thing she is. Not control, but chaos. It was only until Pochita came and killed her children that she became irrelevant. Once again, what the fuck was this guy on? I need a prequel. But it's here where we're reminded of what her biggest fear really is. And it's the same fear that people who refuse to let go of power have. The fear of being forgotten. And I think it's the existential terror that comes with that is at the core of the story. The fear of being forgotten is the fear that your life hasn't had enough meaning to stay. And so in that existential terror, we desperately seek purpose, and Fujimoto shows how that leads to madness as we try to find a purpose that justifies our existence. And so just like in part 1, Fujimoto shows that fear gives birth to ignorance. But what is this ignorance? Well, in part 2, it's clear that ignorance is the refusal to understand others, which is different from part 1, and he makes it clear who the biggest monster is, and it is a monster that exists all around us. In one of the best fights I've ever seen, by the way, like holy shit, I cannot wait for this to be animated. America gets criticized, and to be honest, I have never seen America be this directly shat on since ever, bro. I don't fucking remember any piece of media, maybe Metal Gear Solid 2, but that's more of like the fucking, having the plot twist being that Pochita didn't even need to vomit the nukes back out because they built them again from scratch is insane. And having Yoru literally turn the Statue of Liberty into this, have the national anthem playing while children are getting bombed, say the words "I love America" is even more insane. I cannot believe the people at Jump let him release this, but fuck yeah. But to be honest, his opinion on America has always been there all throughout his works. The gun devil, the American president sacrificing the life of innocent civilians again and again, and now Yoru. But I think my absolute favorite example is this art of Captain America. The shield covers its eyes, blind to what it's doing. The gun looms larger than the flag it claims to represent. The star covered in the organs of others as it drives into its own neck. A symbol turned against itself, looking more horrifying than the supposed monsters it fights. This artwork captures the disgusting hypocrisy of a land of freedom built on the act of taking that freedom from everyone else. And I have to say that on a personal level, I feel seen when these kind of depictions are made. Just a little bit of context, I'm a British Iraqi. I was actually born in 2003 on the month in which the US invasion started, my family moving to London just before I was born to avoid getting bombed like many of my family members did. But I think what really fucks me up is just looking at the state of it with my own two eyes when I go to visit. Where I'm from, Nasiriyah, fun fact, a very historical place, is where a lot of the fighting happened, and it is in pieces. You cannot find a road unless you travel out, and every building is in rubbles. Kids everywhere begging, and the cats and dogs are boneless. One of the most surreal experiences I've ever had was visiting my grandma one year and coming back the next to find, I shit you not, a blown up double-decker bus outside of her house. How the fuck does that even happen? But I think what really gets to me is how so long after that invasion happened, people are still struggling. All of that so I can only now hear it to be almost unanimously agreed that it was a wrong decision, one made on false allegations, and to see sympathy given only to the soldiers who fought rather than to the innocent men, women and children who had everything taken away from them. And this is something that is still being carried on to this day, still supporting countries bombing others, killing men, women and children. But panels like like this of a person holding their heart burnt to ashes is so powerful in showing that no innocent person ever deserves to die, no matter what cause or belief you fight for. There is none. None. Everybody has things they love, things they hate, people they care about, hopes and dreams. Nobody deserves to have it all taken away from them. This idea built on the back of people not being allowed to be their own person in Chainsaw Man, but now, not because of society, but because of death. And so it's clear what Fujimoto is trying to say. America is a force of destruction in the world today, blind by the most fanatical concept of them all, and one that goes beyond religion, and one, funnily enough, introduced by Napoleon himself. Nationalism, and how it somehow leads to people justifying even this. The response to this, of course, has been mixed. On one hand, people appreciate Fujimoto's honesty, and on the other hand, you have people defensive, mainly saying, oh, how was Fujimoto talking when Japan was worse? And I have two responses to this. One is me trying to be nice here. He spent almost the entirety of part 1 criticizing Japan and then doing it again on multiple occasions in part 2. Specifically going to my old Devouring the Young point, how the leaders of Japan literally agreed to sacrifice children, and for a country that has the world's oldest population, this is a huge fucking statement. And even more than that, stuff like their ignorance about STDs and STIs are all forms of criticism. He also criticizes Germany, and he also criticizes the Soviet Union again and again. And the reason why America is of course the focus is because it is the superpower of our time. It is the most powerful nation on the planet, so of course it's going to receive most of the criticism. And secondly, if your instant reaction to somebody saying America's wars are horrific and has led to so much damage internally and externally is, oh, this country is worse, then I really want you to think about what Fujimoto is trying to say and what you're doing here. You shouldn't be thinking about defense as the first response. You should be sad at how many people with hopes, dreams, things they like and dislike get that all taken away over higher ups deciding that invading a country and the consequences of it is worth it. And so back to why I hate Chainsaw Man Part 2. On a personal level, the fact that things don't change easily. You're gonna keep struggling, regressing over and over again, and that is a fucking brutal message that hurts me. And on a bigger level, that the world is a shit place. Selfish, ignorant old people and the people who blindly follow will keep existing and making it hard to be alive. But then the question becomes, what is the point of part 2? Well, I think the answer to that question can be found in cats and sexy robots. I'm gonna start with the latter because that is probably what you want, you fucking freak. When I was having this insane Chainsaw Man brain rot, I was watching every piece of fan content I can find, and eventually I came across a TikTok page called Serena, and I have mentioned her so many times throughout this video, and I cannot express how amazing she is. They single-handedly brought back my love for this series, and she has been in the trenches fighting since the start of part 2. So please, please, please go subscribe to her YouTube channel. The link is in the description. She deserves a lot more subscribers, and her content, once again, is phenomenal. But specifically, this video about Chainsaw Man being a story about creative people genuinely blew me away, but more importantly, it got me thinking. Why is being a creator so important to Fujimoto? Why is it so important that he inspires others to be creatives, to be their own people? The more I thought about it, the more it led me to thinking about other creatives who I thought were similar, and almost instantly this parallel I made was between him and a guy by the name of Yoko Taro, mainly because he is also a fucking weirdo, and also Hideo Kojima, but he is a bit too much of a psychopath to properly talk about. Yoko Taro is the creator of the Nier franchise and my favorite game of all time, Nier Automata. Actually, I'm lying, it's my second favorite game of all time, but people would bully me if they found out that Final Fantasy 15 was actually my favorite game ever. And it's a game that deals with a lot of similar themes to Chainsaw Man Part 2, religion, violence, war, the drive to reproduce, and the search for a higher meaning, and also makes very clear references to American politics, literally releasing one of his games on September the 11th. And it leads me to the question of why? Why critique things so directly? Why dedicate so much effort and time to it? Surely you don't think it's gonna really change the world. But the thing is, they do, or they thought it would. There's a quote from Yoko Taro that really sticks with me, and it's basically him saying that he was genuinely disappointed at the fact that there was no uprising against the government after the release of one of his games. And it just blew me away that he genuinely believed that his art might have led to this. And I think the same applies to Fujimoto. Through stories like Look Back, depicting the characters dealing with their emotions through manga, you can feel that it is fucking everything to him. Literally saying in interviews that whenever he feels a strong emotion, he goes and draws. He uses manga to express things about himself that he simply couldn't without it, and in turn make changes that he couldn't without it. They flip the medium on its head, subvert expectations at every possible turn, all to make you think. Really think. They create with the hope that things might change, that their work might inspire others to do the same. Those emotions we feel towards stories like Chainsaw Man, take it, think about it, and carve it into you. Because the truth is, when meaning is stripped away from us, we're left with despair, desperately searching for something to fill that void. A lot of the time forcing you to conform to the world, to media, to popular beliefs, and to what society demands. And what that can create is the refusal to even try and understand yourself, and in turn understanding one another, fearing it, and in turn becoming numb to empathy. But through stories like Chainsaw Man, we see that we must reject that desire. We must show love and empathy. The only way to escape this cycle is to commit a senseless act of love towards yourself and towards others. Not only as creatives, but as human beings. You should refuse to let fear turn into ignorance. Create, feel, be you. And there's one character that embodies that more than anyone. In the series, you can never really blame Denji for anything that he felt guilty for. He killed his dad in self-defense, Arki because he had no choice, Power was Makima's doing, and Nayuta was Barum's. But later in the series, we finally see him confront his guilt, and it is to do with the very cat he saved at the start. You see, the boy he let die was actually a Chainsaw Man fan, but not like all the other heretics, but because he was genuinely inspired. He wanted to help others. However, Denji's decision to abandon humans for a cat led to that boy's death. And I know that you could still blame it on the demon that dropped them, but this was the most active choice Denji has made out of all the examples. And it comes back to haunt him. The fire devil literally explaining to him that the boy he let die was a genuinely kind, innocent person. And now that he's forced to face his sins with nowhere to run, he can do nothing but revert to a child, shaking and saying sorry. His defense is broken, his self-hatred on full display, and he can do nothing but cry. But listen, growing up, reading stories like Chainsaw Man, speaking to others, you realize that this is no way to live. Everybody has their struggles, their pains, their joys, and so even if I understand that the world is both cruel and beautiful, if I can't confront that within myself, my sorrow, then I will never be able to cherish my loves. I must take all of my experiences and transform into something new instead of holding on to a part of my identity from the past. And that is a concept that you see through Asa Mitaka. There's a popular theory in the Chainsaw Man fandom called the Fight Club theory, and it essentially revolves around the idea that Yoru is just a figment of Asa's imagination. At her moment of death, she wishes to be more selfish, and what that does is it gives birth to a chaotic, outgoing, careless side of her, and one that her trauma would never allow to exist. Now, there's a lot of things going for this theory. The unreliable narrator trope is something we've seen Fujimoto do before, but it also has flaws, since how the fuck does Yoru know about shit that Asa doesn't, like the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, etc. But the theory itself isn't what's important here. It's the idea of Yoru and Asa being one that really intrigues me. Throughout part 2, we see Asa and Yoru slowly changing to become more similar to one another. Asa becomes more calculated and just a badass, and Yoru becomes more emotional, even developing feelings for Denji. They are transforming. I want to go back to the foundation of part 1 for a moment, specifically the fusion of Denji and Pochita. What actually are they? At first we think it's just Pochita giving Denji his powers, but especially in part 2, we see that it's not that simple. They are almost the same being at this point. Where in part 1 we saw Pochita living inside Denji, we now see Denji living inside Pochita and communicating consistently for the first time. They are more than human and devil, but because it's a relationship built on genuine love, it's not something Denji or Pochita struggle with, whereas Asa and Yoru, beings at odds with one another, do. But it is also through love, the love of Denji, that they transform. Asa has been a joy to experience throughout part 2, mainly because of her neurodivergent tendencies, but also in just how she's developed throughout. Instead of being selfish like she wanted to, she's learned to help others, try to understand other people, and understand herself, encapsulating everything I've mentioned so far. And in the latest chapter, even acknowledging her traumas to try and move beyond it in whatever situation she's in. I've seen most stories treat the idea of identity as this stagnant thing, something that we have that we just need to find someday. But that isn't accurate, and Fujimoto goes beyond it. Our identity today is never going to be the same as it was yesterday. We are constantly changing and constantly evolving through our experiences and connections, pushing the idea that we must accept what we are now and transform. The only thing that matters is that our heart is in the right place when we do so. And although still not perfect, Asa still has issues to deal with, a lot of issues to deal with. She is now becoming something more and helping Denji do this the same way he did for her at the start. And this leads me to the final fucking conclusion about this series that I have spent way too much time on. Chainsaw Man Part 2 is a superhero origin story. In the Aging Devil arc, we see Denji now at his lowest point, having just lost the most important thing in his life, Nayuta. Now stuck in a bizarre, timeless world he self-loathes, crying and on the floor, having lost everything again. And it gets so bad that he ends up vomiting these two really fucking ugly devils. But it turns out to be more than that. It starts to snow and the bitter taste of coffee runs through his mouth. He starts to remember those he loves. Archean Power standing in the snow, Reze's laugh, and Nayuta running through the park with the dogs and Miyawi on her shoulder. He realizes then that Pochita never ate them to make him forget as a defense mechanism like we thought, but so that when the time was right, Denji would remember. I mentioned a book earlier that has a similar concept called If Cats Disappeared from the World. The protagonist making a deal with the devil that for everything he erases, he gets another day to live. I also kind of forgot to mention that he also lived a very shit life. His mum died of illness, his dad no longer speaks to him, the love of his life has left him, and he works as a postman, a job that when you first start reading, it doesn't seem that he cares about, and now he's all alone. But for some reason, he's still too scared to die. And so he erases phones, clocks, movies, each time having to reflect on what makes these things special. And eventually he's forced to contemplate erasing cats. In the end, he refuses the devil's final bargain to erase cats, because doing so would mean losing his beloved cat Cabbage, the last connection to his late mother and a symbol of love in his life. But it's only through the devil's offers to erase things that he comes to realize that these things only matter because of the people and memories attached to them. Movies remind him of the time he shared with a person he loves. Clocks mark the moments he spent with his mother, and Cabbage represents unconditional love. And by choosing not to erase cats, even though it means accepting his own death, he understands that life's value doesn't come from extending it, but from cherishing the relationship and emotions that give meaning to the world around us, ultimately showing that it's not objects themselves that make life beautiful, it's the way they connect us to others. Power said to Denji at the end of part 1 to come and find her, but maybe he already did, and with that he already found Archie. We value things because of the people they remind you of, and in a way that's what keeps them alive. And this is what allows Denji to keep moving forward beyond and violence, because this is what really matters in part 2. He will keep loving others, keep building families, and keep trying to stay true to himself in a world that will keep trying to force him to be something that he's not. Something that Nayuta herself, for the short period of time she stayed, was also able to do, living a good life because of Denji's hugs. And with that, there will always be room for the new you, and there will keep being new yous, because that's life. And if you keep staying true to yourself, no matter how much you change, you will attract others like you. Find that there is a surprising amount of people out there willing to help you on your journey to accepting who you are. And when that time comes, you should also try to help others, inspire others, tell them to be themselves and not to give up their identity for someone else, because that is the only way we can rebel against this cruel world we live in. Because when you do that, you will find that maybe, just maybe, people can be just as beautiful as cats. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know if you can tell, I love Chainsaw Man. I love Chainsaw Man Part 2, so I hope this video did it justice. Also, I don't know if you can tell, I ended up renting out an entire cinema. No, I am not rich. I am actually not rich in the slightest. I ended up using half of my monthly salary to do this, but I don't care. It was worth it. Was it unnecessary? Yes. Was it worth it? Yes. That being said, if you are interested in helping me do stupid stuff like this, then, you know, checking out the Patreon would do wonders. I take everything I make from Patreon, I reinvest it into stupid stuff like this. So yeah, it would be appreciated a lot. And of course, if you are not in a position where you can help me out on Patreon, then subscribing, liking, and sharing does just as much. But yeah, on the basis of that, as usual, I hope you live a long, happy life, my friends.